role is in this.
As my colleague Jeff Rosenfeld said, I'm losing my voice a little bit today. I'm a little bit under the weather, but I'm an attorney. I'm based out of Arizona, but I work for the law firm Cronenberger Rosenfeld and help with TCPA and email commercial compliance.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you guys hopping on here. Means a lot to us and our community and all of the Speed to Lead users. Listen, I mean, we've made a lot of money working with Speed to Lead. We've been working with them since 2021. Obviously, there's a lot of questions that everybody inside the real estate investing world has, as far as does this mean, PPL is going away? How do we stay compliant? Is it even possible? So I'll just ask questions and let you guys open forum, decide how you want to respond to them. First and foremost, Gene, I think the number one question that I've gotten so far in regards to Speed to Lead is, will the coupon club still exist, right? Well, we're going to start with the cheap ones first because that's what everybody wants to know about. So talk about how coupon club can still exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, RJ, for the question. And big help here were Jeff and Jim from Cronenberg Rosenfeld. And we are absolutely going to be compliant for Coupon Club leads. And Coupon Club is going to be there. It is not going away. Thank you, RJ, for providing the forum for us to talk about that. So Coupon Club leads are going to be compliant, and we've actually designed a couple of solutions for it. We're actually glad that this thing happened because, to be honest with you, I think we're probably gonna actually do business even better than before. You know what? Never really thought of that, but so we've got a number of solutions in place, including for Coupon Club. So number one, fixed price mode, the exclusive leads where it's one buyer per lead, very simple, right? That stuff is the most, was the easiest domino to kind of knock down. And so those folks, the compliance is just handled very straightforward, in a very straightforward way. Now for Coupon Club, what we developed is a couple of solutions. One of them is basically it's sort of a messenger between Speed to Lead and the seller, and between the seller and the wholesaler, right? So the compliance actually takes place inside of that messenger. So when we get a lead into Speed to Lead, we get consent with that lead between us and that lead right away, right? But then Coupon Club, the nature of those leads, right, is the fact that we don't know who's going to buy that lead until a certain amount of time has passed. All right. So for that, we came up with two solutions. Actually, number one is we're rolling out later this week an ability for our Coupon Club customers to actually set up basically like an automatic buying program where you can set up your parameters, set up your geography, your county and whatnot. And instead of waiting for the lead to go in and hit the lead feed, you can actually design it. As soon as that lead becomes eligible for Coupon Club, you're already going to get that lead automatically. Okay, so we're going to charge you and give you that lead automatically. That lead's already going to come with consent because we got consent for that lead 48 hours ago, right? So I think the big myth here that it needs to be dispelled is that consent needs to be gotten or can only be gotten for one. That ain't true, right? So we can and do get consent for multiple people ahead of time as soon as we get the person in there. And in fact, inside the messenger, we've designed it in a beautiful way where it's kind of gamified for the seller to just click on everybody who we need them to click on and get the consent. And so that's all taken care of. So you can do it through the automatic Coupon Club, but even if you don't want the automatic option, and you just want to buy a lead in the lead feed, and you're a Coupon Club customer, you click and buy that lead. And as soon as you do that, we're going to get consent from the seller. And we were not lazy with this. We've been working on this in the past 5 months, I think, this whole process. which Jeff and Jim, I thought I was late. Jeff and Jim tell me we're actually in a better shape than 99% of companies. So I'm, happy to hear that. But so there's even a failover, right? So as soon as somebody buys a Coupon Club lead, we're getting the consent from that seller through the already established connection that we have with that seller, because we already created that messenger conversation with the seller. We've already texted the seller before. We can text them. So as soon as you buy the lead in Coupon Club, we're sending that consent message to them via text, okay? And here's the kicker. We're also right away calling that seller and obtaining the consent through them via phone, all right? And then later on, even better, I got something even cooler for you guys. We are actually, and I'm hoping probably, so all the consent stuff will be good on the 27th, but probably mid-February, we're gonna roll out something even cooler. And this is where I meant this is gonna be better for the business. As soon as you buy that lead inside a Coupon Club, or inside of the lead feed, if it's not on Coupon Club, let's say you buy a lead an hour after it comes in, we're going to call that seller, get consent, and we're going to live transfer you to that seller, so you don't even have to call them and worry about like, hey, do I reach the seller now, or do I need to follow up with that seller? We're going to triple dial them as soon as you buy a lead, connect you. Like, you don't even have to pick up your freaking phone and wait and listen to the voicemail. We got all that. Okay. So, and then if they don't pick up on the first time, in an hour, we're going to do that again. We're going to do that for you. So that connection to the lead, we're also taking care of that. So we have like a 3-layer way to make sure that you're getting consent. So you're extremely well taken care of. I do want to say that this is very important that you're doing this, RJ, because it's extremely important for wholesalers, for our customers, and for any PPL customer to understand how the company they're buying leads from is going to be handling consent. Because if it's just hearsay, right, or not hearsay, if it's just like a naked promise, and they're not willing to show you any of the guts of the system and how it works, and that's the cool thing about this messenger thing that we developed, you're going to actually see, it's like you're going to see the same button that the seller clicked on with the consent language. You're going to see that button on your side of that messenger. Actually, another little bonus from this, you can also chat back and forth with the seller too. But we're like, hey, transparent, here's the actual consent that we got from the seller, okay? You got to make sure that whatever provider you're working with, you know exactly how they're getting it, and that they're getting it. Because, and I'll let Jim and Jeff weigh in on this, on what the liability is, right? If it's a shared liability between the PPL company and the actual wholesaler who's on the phone, right? Let's let them comment on that. What risk you're facing if, let's say, your PPL company is not serious about it, or maybe not PPL, whatever lead generator that you're using is not serious about it. What happens to you if you do get the unattractive email one day, or the little thing in your business inbox?
Right. Jim, go ahead and chime in on that.
Yeah, so let me give a few comments, and thank you, Gene. So I first want to echo what Gene said, that iSpeed to Lead is taking TCPA compliance very seriously, and particularly this one-to-one consent rule that's going to go into effect in a couple of weeks. As Gene indicated, they are on top of it, much more so than a lot of other players in the field. So that has been very reassuring for Jim and me to see, because it is scary out there, as Gene indicated, that TCPA litigation, it is a hotbed of litigation. If you haven't been sued yet, be thankful. And we're dealing with very stiff penalties, and very little upside to litigating. So what ends up happening so often is that folks who are facing a TCPA lawsuit will pay a nuisance settlement. And hopefully it is manageable. And so what we expect to see going forward, particularly after January 27th, is a significant uptick in TCPA lawsuits. And it is most dangerous for folks who are purchasing leads, right? Who did not get the consent themselves, because you are relying on a representation by the lead provider. And if Gene can show you the guts of his system, and you can see how consent is being obtained and that it is in fact a valid one-to-one consent, that should give you significant comfort. If by comparison, you're just taking the word of the lead generator that they got consent, Jim and I have both seen too many times that representation is not accurate, or that they cannot substantiate that representation with a record of consent if a lawsuit follows. So, regardless of what industry you're in, regardless of what vertical you're part of, we always want to get the best records of consent possible, because TCPA litigation is that dangerous.
So on that note, I do have a specific question on that, because the way that I read the regulation, and it seems like it's very clearly spelled out, that it says if Speed to Lead were to get consent, then Speed to Lead is then covered. But the person who purchased that also has to have written consent in order to avoid being sued themselves. How and where will our written consent from Speed to Lead be stored? So if we were to get served, we could say, this is nothing. I've got written consent right here. Game over. I had consent. How will that be delivered to us?
Yeah, so we're number one, it's stored inside the method of communication that we're using between us and the seller. So inside this new messenger functionality, but that's not enough. Usually in court, from what I understand, this company Active Prospect has been kind of it's kind of an authority in the space. So we have an Active Prospect session that actually records and stores it in their database. That is basically it works in court if you have a Active Prospect recording, right? In layman's terms. So we always have an Active Prospect record for every single button click of that seller clicking a consent button. So let's say we have a lead that comes in for a fixed price mode, let's say for RJ Bates. So that seller is going to click on this thingy that says, hey, you okay with RJ Bates getting your contact info and contacting you via text, email, or via a messenger pigeon or whatever the frick it is. Like, actually, Jeff and I came up with a new term, and it's the BFT, the big fucking text. All right. So that big fucking text next to, with RJ's name or every single customer's name that we have there, whether you bought the lead fixed price mode, whether you bought the lead coupon club, you just bought it in the feed, okay? The seller is going to get the BFT and your name next to it, and they're going to click on that button, and you're going to get all of this leads information like you did before, right? So, and my whole philosophy here was like, all right, two things. We've got all these people making all this money with Coupon Club, and we also make a decent living with Coupon Club as well. It's our budgetary program, right? But I'm like, the way I looked at it, I was like, I gotta defend this business model from whatever the government's trying to do, because the government's not even looking at our industry. They're mostly looking at like the car warranty or all those annoying freaking people that are calling, like really literally they're selling the leads information to like hundreds of firms. We maybe sell a lead to like 3-4 people sometimes, not even always, right? But we're getting affected anyway. So my whole thing was to defend our business model and our customers' product that they know and love from being shaken up by the industry, and we actually got a little opportunity to make it better, because now we're going to introduce a little bit of a convenience where, number one is you're gonna feel good that, like, hey, the consent is there, you're not worried about getting sued. And if you get sued, come see me, we pick up the tab. But you're not going to get sued, right? With TCPA, we did have a couple of lawsuits in 2024 where somehow I forget what the scenario was, but it was a DNC litigator or something like that, and it was some couple of leads got away, but we picked up the tab for the customer. I was like, hey, you're taken care of. Don't even talk to that freaking litigator. It's on us. We went and negotiated the fees. Jeff sent the thing, and then boom, like it was all. We picked up the tab for it. Not a small tab either.
All right, Jeff and Jim, I want to throw this question to you guys. This is in the chat from Kevin James. He said, "Is clicking a button the same as written consent in the eyes of the law?"
So good question, and luckily we have an easy answer to that one. Yes. Clicking a button on a website is sufficient written consent. And so that is the most common way consent is obtained under the TCPA. Now, having said that, one, there needs to be an adequate disclosure that's conspicuously displayed next to the button. We've all seen them before. That's the BFT that Gene was talking about. It says that you agree to receive phone calls, including automated phone calls and artificial, and that you can stop at any time. So you need that. And now when the one-to-one consent rule goes into play, the caller will need to be identified in close proximity to the BFT, to the disclosure. So it could say that Joe Smith is going to call you, or there are other ways that Gene and Jim and I have been exploring how to do this. You may have a list of 3 or 4 people, and the user could check boxes and say, I agree to get calls from A and B, but not C. But to answer your question, yes, clicking a button is adequate written consent.
Will the consent be prior to lead purchase, or is it real time? And then what happens if the seller says no?
Yeah, great question. So if you're fixed price mode customer or automatic coupon club customer, which automatic coupon club goes live tonight, actually. Actually might already be live. But that in those cases, it's prior to purchase. So you purchase the lead already with consent, right? If you buy the lead from the feed, the consent is obtained in real time. So we text that seller, and then we also call that seller through an automatic line and get the consent one of those 2 ways, and it's in real time in those cases. If the seller says no, that's another benefit that I forgot to mention. If a seller says no, you know how much time we spend on refund requests? We have 5 freaking live support agents every day handling refund requests from sellers that changed their mind, or from sellers that whatever happened, right? Or they were just snooping around or whatever. If the seller says no, we're gonna send that refund to you right away, and we're gonna save your precious time on filing for a refund and clicking all those support buttons and all that. Not that that's hard. We made that pretty easy. I think we've got a pretty robust refund obtaining process there. But we're actually going to we're going to cut down our time processing those refund requests, because some of the sellers just fall off because they would have fallen off anyway. 15%. So average is like about 15% of speed to lead leads get refunded. This is without consent, with our standard consent rules right now, right? So now we just get to kick them out sooner and get you your refund sooner, and get you to buy the next lead that actually wants an offer.
Will this work only during business hours Monday through Friday, or is it 24 hours a day?
So there are some limitations on when we can text and call sellers. And in fact, I think this is good that we're taking on this in this capacity, because we all know that, like, there's customers, there's wholesalers, there's sellers that contact leads whenever. There are certain limitations on when you can contact them, and so we'd rather kind of have that flexibility, so then you don't get sued. And especially, like, we do pick up the tab if we did something stupid and a lawsuit happened. We pick up the tab for our customer, and they don't have to pay any of that litigation fee. And we've done that a number of times. I can't say we've spent millions on that. Thank God we haven't. But 2024, we spent about 70 grand on lawsuit crap and all that shit. And our customers were not affected in it. And so we'd rather have that control of not having you do something not good with the seller. And so, yeah, there's another, before I forget, there was a very important question here that I actually want Jeff and Jim to weigh in on, because so to the seller, we will show the seller whatever information you have in your profile, right? Now, there was a question here. Should there be the name of the company or the name of the actual person running the company? And if there's any difference, or what's actually more recommended? I can guess the answer, but I'm going to let Jeff weigh in on that if he has a comment.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, some of these details are still a gray area, but our interpretation is the name of the company should be disclosed. If it is a formal company that you've organized it as an LLC or a corporation, then that's what should be disclosed.
All right, next question I have for you, Jeff, and Jim, I'd love to hear from you as well. Sound like you had something you want to say there, so go ahead before I ask my next question.
If you took the time to form a company, then you should not be afraid to let that company be your representation. Because if you think from the perspective of the type of people that bring these lawsuits, they're going to say, if we had said, for example, oh, we'll just put the name of the company on there, the caller's name doesn't matter. They'll say the caller's name matters in their lawsuit. If we say, well, you identified the caller but not the company, they're going to say, well, you didn't identify the company in their lawsuit. So it's not just because we're lawyers. We always advise from the perspective of risk avoidance, but as a practical matter for this type of litigation, even though it's not clear, the safest method is always going to be to disclose both the caller and your business, who they are calling on behalf of.
All right, so this is probably the second most frequently asked question that I've had since, I made a video back in November. I probably shouldn't have made the video, but the inner YouTuber in me, the clickbaity title of "Is PPL dead or not?" I mean, I just had to fucking do it, so I did it. And now I've been just getting bamboozled for the past 2 months with questions. This is the question, though, that I don't know if any of us actually know the answer or not, because, we want to write laws and regulations in such vague context that, no one can interpret it. If I buy a lead on January 26th that does not have any consent language, can I call it on January 27th?
So the prevailing view is no, you cannot. That the one-to-one consent rule is there's not going to be a grandfathering clause in there for non-compliant consent that was obtained prior to January 27th. So
what you're telling me is we've got 18 days to go talk to every seller on every lead that we've ever purchased, because after that, we run the risk of being fined. That is correct.
Now, you obviously there are other protections in place and things you can do, but the one-to-one consent rule is going into effect.
Now, Jeff,
walk me through those other protections, baby. Protect me up. What do I got to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And also, let's mention that whole existing business relationship thing that you were telling me.
Yeah. So this gets a little legally wonky, so bear with me. The TCPA has several prohibitions. You can't use an automatic telephone dialing system without prior written consent. You can't use an artificial or pre-recorded voice without prior written consent. And you can't call someone on the national do not call list without prior written consent. There's some more prohibitions, but those are the biggies. Now, most of you are not using an ATDS, an automatic telephone dialing system. So we cross out that one. Most of you, hopefully, are not using an artificial or pre-recorded voice to deliver a message. So that one gets a little fuzzier. But let's say we cross out that one. So then the one prohibition we need to worry about is, are we calling people on the national do not call list or on your entity specific do not call list? If you are not, if the person, the called party is not on the national do not call list, you don't need consent. So it doesn't matter that you don't have one-to-one consent, because you don't need consent at all. If the person is on the national do not call list, you need written consent before you call them, or you need to have an established business relationship. This established business relationship does not apply to the other prohibitions under the TCPA, but it does apply to the do not call prohibition. And what an established business relationship is either the called party, the consumer, has purchased a good or service from you within the last 18 months, or has made an inquiry or expressed interest in your service within the last 3 months. And if that is the case, you can call them, even though they're on the national do not call list, until they revoke that consent. And so the idea here is, even if you got non-compliant consent on January 26th, it doesn't comply with one-to-one. By providing that consent, the consumer has established a business relationship. It's expressed interest in your service. And so there's no certainties with TCPA. You can be sued for anything, but this should give you all some comfort that those older consents are going to be reliable, at least for the time being. So there's the technical answer to your question, and then there's kind of the realistic answer of how this is going to play out.
So realistically, if we've purchased a lead since October 27th, that falls in the 3-month time window of them reaching out to inquire about our services.
Right. If I'm doing my math correctly.
That was the math I just did by looking at a calendar. So, okay. So that makes me feel better. I see some people are on here were concerned about what are they going to do with their older leads. Listen, there's going to be, it's never great when regulations come down because we have to make adjustments. But like Gene was saying at the beginning, ultimately, I believe this is going to be for the better because, well, first and foremost, Gene now has gone a step further to now where he's connecting us, right? What's one of the biggest problems people have had with PPL has been, I can't get a hold of the seller. Well, now they're actually doing that for us, at least on that first go around right after we purchased the lead. So there's benefits and there's a downside. I guess I'll throw this to anybody. Michael, you might want to weigh in this if you have ideas. People are still getting deals off of leads that, date back 6-9 months. Is there something that we could do with those? Is there any way that we can be compliant, or is that just pretty much like, hey, there's nothing that we can do with those?
Yeah, we're thinking about it because we're also just found out about this whole consent of the older leads. We actually asked it after this package things to make sure that people can dial. So yeah, they can definitely dial them until 27th. After 27th, so what we're probably going to do is we're probably going to, because we have consent to those leads because they opted in on our stuff and all that. And so we're probably going to have a couple of like mass follow-up exercises for people that want that. Because there are just a few folks that have a pretty massive list. So we're going to definitely contact contact me or contact Yuri. And obviously, don't follow those up like hell now. But if you've got a large amount of leads that you're still like going, like you picked them up over Christmas and you're still going through them, definitely let us know, and we're gonna run the follow-up exercise from our end.
I mean, that's all I'm saying. Let's have a hell of a January. We still got 3 weeks. Let's go. Jeff, Jim, I want to ask you guys because we haven't really touched base on this. We just kind of came in and bulldozed it. Listen, it's my personality. If you don't know what we're talking about, I don't know where you've been. Welcome to the business. But let's scare the piss out of people, and then also let's shit on some competition because I like doing that. So you said 90% of the competition doesn't know what the fuck's going on. They're behind the game, right? And then also talk about what potential fines a buyer, us, the wholesaler, could face if they are getting leads from a PPL provider that's not compliant. And then on that side of things, right, how much does that look like? And then when you say the competition is behind, if they're exploring outside of Speed Elite, what do they need to see? You talked about the guts, but give them like specifics. What do they need to see to make sure they are compliant?
I'll start off. I'll let Jim chime in, and I apologize. You broke up a little bit there, but I think I caught your question. So,
how much is the fine to start off with?
As I mentioned before, everybody's scrambling to comply with one-to-one. And for anybody that's dealing with a significant quality of lead sales, it has to be a technological dynamic solution. That's what we see. Or you have to remove yourself from the ambit of placing outbound calls. And so what I've seen, at least with Gene's group, is that they're very technologically adroit, and they're moving very quickly to get a system in place where it can dynamically achieve one-to-one consent. That has not been the case with some other folks I've seen. That it's
By the way, other competition that's watching us, if you need a solution, we're going to sell you the solution.
So, I mean, everybody's scrambling to get something like this in place because, as I said, I think the lawsuits are going to surge. That plaintiffs and plaintiffs' attorneys are waiting for January 27th, and then they're going to go out to look for inadequate consent and bring suits. Right? We've seen this practice to date under the TCPA, and it's just gonna continue. So, if you are buying leads from any company, you just need to figure out how they're getting consent and how they're maintaining records of that consent. And ideally, you see it visually, and it's not just a representation. Because if you haven't been sued yet, great. But if you are working in telemarketing, you are going to get sued. It's just a matter of time under the TCPA. I wish it were different. But when you get sued, if you can go to the plaintiff or the plaintiff's attorney and say, you consented, here's the record, here's the video of you checking the box, that suit will go away much more quickly. And so that's what we'd like to do. And Jim, I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
Just to address RJ's question, because I think, Jeff, you might have broken up a bit. The TCPA fines, at a minimum, are $500 and then $1,500 for a willful violation.
Per call.
Per
or
call.
Text.
So, and there's a source of authority, too, that even the same text, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, there can be more than one for different types of violations within the TCPA for the same call or text. So you're looking at potentially, say, one text, $500, but there's a second text, that's $1,500. Third text, $1,500, because one of the things to consider for a willful violation is this a repeated offense? Did you repeatedly text me or call me after I never gave consent in the first place, or after I asked to unsubscribe? Something we're describing now with the TCPA compliance.
Awesome. Great explanation there, guys. Gene, it appears that we have a question specifically for you.
Yeah, my daughter was like, "Hey, I don't want you to leave. Why are you leaving the house again?" So I told her to watch me on YouTube, and so she's asking, why do I look so serious?
I love it. Why?
Zlatan.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Jeff, Jim, I know y'all had a meeting that y'all had to get to, or if you guys need to hop off, I think you answered majority of our legal questions. So if you guys need to hop off, y'all can.
I think the audience is going to want them back.
Yeah, I agree. But if you guys are willing to stay around, we can go through more of these questions. I just want to be respectful of y'all's time.
I'll jump off, Jim. Do you have time to stay on?
I can stay on for a few more minutes.
Okay. Cool.
It's nice meeting everybody, and look forward to chatting more.
Jeff, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Actually, I have something that I was going to bring up on the last one, but Jim, you can cover it. So when it comes to, and I'd rather a lawyer cover this versus me talking about it, because it's always like, I can always say, check with your lawyer on this. So having you here is perfect. But when it comes to the violation, if somebody is buying, for example, from iSpeed to lead, and they're buying a bunch of leads from us and we're covering it, we're making sure that everything's taken care of, but then they go over to another provider who is not doing that. If they end up getting audited, for example, or sued on a good lead, can they get fined on all the other leads that are in their system?
So I want to be careful how I answer that, because we're talking about a different type of legal enforcement action. When you talk about an audit and whether or not an organization is maintaining enterprise compliance, that's a little bit different than the types of piecemeal lawsuits that we've been discussing, and that I think a lot of your listeners and viewers are probably thinking about. I get, like Gene said, I get the thing at my business where it says it's either a demand letter or it's a lawsuit, or something in between. The fines for a non-compliant enterprise, I don't have them up on my screen, but I can tell you that the FCC and FTC are very serious about enforcement, and they are very aware, to their credit, about the implications of the rules that they are working to implement. And I say that partially too because I've heard just in the last couple of weeks a lot of clamoring online and from other folks that operate in this area. Oh, well, the rule's not going to go online. The one-to-one consent rule, President Trump, when he takes office, he's going to get rid of it. Or I hear that about every law. Whenever there's a new law, no, there's no way they could do that. I presented on this proposed rule change it's almost 2 years ago in April in Las Vegas to some other attorneys. Now, they operate in this area, so they knew it was coming online. Nobody was saying, it's not going to happen. But an enforcement action, to keep myself from rambling here, an enforcement action by the government is very different than an individual represented by an attorney who sues you, but both should be taken seriously. And as Jeff described, we're seeing a lot of organizations that want to comply. They're trying to comply. And what Gene's group has an advantage on is that technological savviness that they've previewed and worked with us on in terms of implementing, for example, the one-to-one consent compliance mechanism. That's what makes them unique. But yes, the fines are steep either way, regardless of who it is. And if you think about it at the smallest level, even an individual who may do this on their own behalf, I think some of your viewers and listeners are probably aware that a lot of TCPA litigation involves folks who are representing themselves in court. They're going to go after folks that have sent lots of texts, have completely violated the rule, have made no effort. I saw this morning an email about a lawsuit where there was a screen capture in the lawsuit of them opting out, stop, text reply to stop, and then 2 more texts right after it. That's what gets people's attention, and that's what we're working with Gene's group and seeing already a lot of proactive efforts to avoid those types of scenarios.
Jim, And I think you could not be rambling, brother. Right now, everyone's hanging on to every letter dropping out of your mouth, man. You will never ramble. Trust me.
Nobody ever got done listening to a lawyer and was like, "Oh, I just want him to keep talking." Unless when it's free, that's when they're.
Well, let me ask you this. So the thing that remember how we met the first time is that class act. I don't think you mentioned the class action way of doing this, and that's can you just talk about how that works? Because they pull up all your records of other people that you texted, and
that's what I was thinking of.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
with the audit. Sorry, I probably used the wrong language there, but yeah, I was thinking of the class action with the audit.
I'm glad we talked about the audit, but this is I would say maybe a third type of lawsuit that you're likely to encounter, and this would very likely be brought by an attorney because they typically are. We're talking about a class action lawsuit. Typically in federal court, there's a specific federal rule. Everybody's heard of class actions, where you're suing not just on behalf of yourself, but the plaintiff is representing a group of other plaintiffs and who are the same or similarly situated in terms of how they received texts from your organization. Now, again, as a practical matter, because of the nature of our discussion here, and setting aside all the legal nuance of that, it allows them to develop increased settlement pressure earlier and for a higher amount, because the legal exposure, the amount of money that you could potentially be on the hook for in a class action lawsuit is whatever the one plaintiff suffered times the number of people in the class if it were to be certified. That could be tens of millions of dollars, and it usually is. And TCPA class actions are very common. And if you say, for example, well, what are their damages? We talked about it earlier. It's $500 and $1,500 for every subsequent. So the damages are easy to ascertain, which is something that the court might consider when it's considering whether to certify a class. So here we have what are called statutory damages: $500 for the first violation, $1,500 for any subsequent willful violation. That's $2,000 right there. That's annoying as it is, right? If you had to pay that settlement for those two texts, well, multiply that by a class that gets certified and could potentially include 10,000 class members. Talking about very essentially unlimited legal exposure from a practical matter, because most businesses can't survive or be able to pay that sort of judgment.
Jim, I've got two questions for you. One, I based off of my understanding of this, and I'm not an attorney, I don't know how you guys function. I would murder people if I did your job, but how does this not kill cold calling?
I think that since I started reading this regulation about 2 years ago, the gist of it to me early on, reading the comments that were being discussed when there was an open forum about whether whether this rule should happen, it seemed like people wanted to kill cold calling. It seemed like that was the idea from some folks' perspective. I think that might have been the idea all along, not from the government's perspective, but from some of the groups that wanted to push these types of rule changes or to significantly curtail it. Now, of course, I'm speculating, but if it's really what you're asking is like, how are cold call centers supposed to have a written consent that identifies the caller, just the caller? I mean, I can tell you by way of example that the discussion that came up leading to the one-to-one rule change, that's just what we're talking about here, was somebody clicked consent, and then in the hyperlink, the consent language, what we're talking about, the BFT, there was no BFT. It was, you agree to be contacted about maybe selling your home. Click this link here to see who might contact you. And it's like 1,200 potential contacts. So by clicking one, consent, they're consenting to something like 1,200 calls. Now, I think from a normal person's perspective, that is kind of annoying, because that might not be what somebody was really thinking when they clicked that. And that creates sort of an ugly picture for that recipient. I signed up one time a year ago. I can't get the calls to stop. So there's that sort of background with telemarketing in general that allows these types of regulations to gain a lot of traction and momentum, to where it's like, well, this seems ridiculous. I don't want to get calls. Not a lot of folks are completely understanding of the nuance of the advantage that somebody might have of saying, I want to sell my house. Let me sign up on this website here so I can have some serious people call me about it.
But Jim, more specifically, I'm going to hammer you on this. I know you're an attorney, but I'm going to get a damn yes or no out of you.
Sure.
I go and I pull a list of 100 random addresses. I skip trace it, and then I hire a Filipino VA, and I tell them to cold call them on batch dialer. How is that not breaking this rule?
It's how. Yeah. So Batch Leads is a company kind of like ZoomInfo, Jim. We talked about this.
It's a dialer. I mean, if I'm skip tracing data.
But the records are obtained from public records on that. It's kind of like a ZoomInfo stuff.
The phone number is obtained from a public record, but the consent, there is no consent in the scenario that you just
correct.
Gave. So they are not compliant. They are not compliant with the one-to-one rule, and they would be
dead.
If that's what you want to say. None of what I'll give you my lawyer answer. None of what I'm giving is legal advice. You need to talk to an attorney licensed.
Jim,
it feels like it's dead. It feels like it's dead.
My job is to make assumptions and to say bold statements.
If you are relying on that type of lead, you run a significant risk of violating the one-to-one consent regulation. Absolutely.
Cold calling is dead.
Next video.
It this weekend, just straight up. That's the whole video. Cold calling is dead. Jim Carlson said so.
Hey man, we want to have him back. We want to have him back on this thing.
I understand. No, I'm happy to answer. I think your audience has the answer between the two of our comments combined there.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a good question. Like I said, when I started reading the comments to the regulation, I had the same thought. I was like, how's the industry supposed to survive without some very expensive changes? And again, Gene's group is taking, that's why we're on right now, is because Gene's group is taking the initiative to comply. And I want to be clear too about everything we said. None of it's legal advice, but what I can tell you from, again, a practical perspective is the folks that, whether it's an attorney, a self-represented litigant, or the government, they start with people who are flagrantly violating any law, right? It's going to be the easiest to prove. The person who didn't take any time whatsoever, isn't even thinking about the role, isn't even thinking about these changes. The one who kept sending over and over and over again messages, that's who they're going to start with, because it's easiest to prove, it's the easiest to extract a settlement out of, or it's the easiest to demonstrate a violation of. Since I've been working with Gene, it seems like we're on the other end as far as we can be, at least in terms of attitude and very quickly in terms of practical implementation.
Real quick, on your side of things, in your world, my anticipation is there are thousands of attorneys ready for the January 27th bloodbath. I mean, are there not just attorneys lined up ready for people to not be compliant and to go after and sue?
That's true of every industry, but yes, that is absolutely true.
But specifically of the attorney industry on January 27th. I know
it is. Yes, there are. And I think that attorneys play a big role in this implementation, because these types of violations require a little bit that, you have to change the type of allegation that you're bringing when you bring your lawsuit or your demand letter. You're saying, well, you didn't obtain one-to-one consent. Well, what does that mean, though? I mean, how do you actually demonstrate that in your briefing? That's what a lot of folks would rely on a lawyer to articulate for them in their lawsuit is, well, you didn't specifically identify in your written consent the person who placed the call that actually called me. Into paragraphs, yes, lawyers are waiting. That's why it's very important to not ignore it, to not stick your head in the sand, and to do what you can to comply.
I love it. Jim, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here? Anything you want to wrap up with?
I don't have any final thoughts. I think we touched on a lot. Again, one thing is meant to be legal advice today, but at the same time, our information is out there, and please feel free to connect with us. And thanks very much for having us on and giving us the opportunity to clarify a lot of this.
Absolutely. Michael, Gene, and then I'll wrap up when you guys are done.
And if you guys hire Jim and Jeff, tell them RJ and Gene sent you. Maybe he'll cut me a discount. I don't know. I'm just kidding. These guys are actually not like they're right. Very very pragmatic as far as their pricing. I highly recommend this firm. I hope they still have time for us after this live stream and after so many other people discover them. So
it's okay. I made you famous, Gene. Maybe I'll make Jim famous too.
There you go. So.
Listen, here's what I want to wrap up with, and I'm so happy that Gene put this together, bringing on Jeff and Jim with their knowledge from the attorney side of things. Listen, I will be bold enough to say this, just like I did in November when I was ignorant and I didn't know all of the ins and outs of the regulations, but I said, this is going to be better for PPL. Just like when they brought down regulations against wholesaling, again, every time the government gets involved, they're too stupid to actually do what they want to do, right? They think that this is going to actually hurt PPL. I think it's going to make PPL better. And in fact, it actually killed the one thing that people want to go do outside of PPL, which is cold calling, right? How many people say I do cold calling because it's cheaper? I told you a year ago, stop cold calling. You didn't listen then. Maybe you'll listen now when I'm saying it's fucking dead. Okay. Yeah, you could still do it. You're going to get sued into oblivion eventually because trust me, if you've cold called and if you've done cold texting, you get sued no matter what. There are people out there that are professional litigators that they will literally trick you into calling them, texting them, they'll get you in, and then they'll be like, I just got you for $20,000 worth of fines. Pay me $5 today, and I'll let you go. Jim, would you back me up? Does that not happen from professional litigators?
Happens all the time.
So they know how to do it. They are very aware of what that 1-1 consent rule is. You're running the risk of it. And in return, what we get is better service from speed to lead. The coupon club is going to be better. The exclusive leads are going to be better. We're going to have consent. We're going to be compliant. And also now Speed to Lead is going to have a freaking connection service for us where they're going to call and connect us to the leads. My lives are going to be so much better. I don't even have to dial anymore. They're going to fucking dial for me. So again, PPL is alive and well. Speed to Lead's alive and well. Cold calling sucks and it's dead.
That's right. That's gonna make the live so much more fun because like you buy the lead, and then it's like, and then you chit chat and you bullshit and all this stuff and then it's like, oh, here it is with consent already.
Yep.
That's gonna be awesome. Yeah, but yeah, guys, coupon club is not going anywhere. Yep. Coupon club remains compliant post Jan 27th. Fixed price mode is not going anywhere. The lead feed is not going anywhere. The only thing that's going away is us selling these big packages of leads that are from the past. And we told y'all in December that we won't be able to do that no more. But oh well.
It is what it is. Jim,
Cassie,
I appreciate your time today and your knowledge. And I had to tell you, brother, I've talked to a lot of attorneys. You're about the damn coolest attorney I've ever met. And that's saying something, I mean, most of you guys I can't really stand. I actually got a somewhat close, straight answer out of you, but you're a pretty damn cool attorney. I'm just letting you know.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I did a lot of things before I was an attorney. I had a lot of different jobs, and I had kind of a different route to becoming an attorney and bringing me here to you all today. So I appreciate it.
Love it. Gene, brother, I appreciate you so much. Appreciate you being a leader in this space and making sure that we're all taken care of. It means a lot hearing what Jeff and Jim had to say about what you guys are doing over there at Speed to Lead and making sure that this is taken care of. And Daniel, you're absolutely right. It's really just Jim's beard. That's all it was. So, all right, guys, that's all we got for you today. We'll see y'all tomorrow.